international peace and security. The United States is committed to real progress during our presidency and carrying that progress into the upcoming General Assembly. And with that, go ahead, Sam.
I wonder if we could start with Niger. If you could give us an update on what you're seeing on the ground, and specifically France and some other European countries have started evacuating their people. Is the US seeing anything that would cause you to start that process?
A few things. Number one, our embassy is open today, operating on a normal schedule. We're monitoring the efforts by France and other Europeans to evacuate their citizens. We urge Nigerian authorities to facilitate an orderly, safe evacuation. At this time, we do not have indications of threats to U.S. citizens or facilities, but we are continually reevaluating our posture to ensure the safety of our citizens.
And I wonder if you would have any comment on these statements by Mali and Burkina Faso rejecting the ECOWAS intervention on Niger, and you know, that basically there's concern that this is going to spill over into a regional conflict. So you know, where does the US stand on those countries you know, seeming to support the coup makers in Niger?
We support the efforts of ECOWAS and leaders in the region to resolve this situation, to restore the democratic president, the elected president of Niger. We obviously saw the comments by other countries. I think it's inappropriate to make those statements at this point. We're not going to engage in hypotheticals. We don't believe there's any reason to ever get to that ultimate conclusion. We believe that the democratically elected president of Niger ought to be restored to full authority immediately.
Do you see any prospect for that? Is there any progress on reversing the coup?
We continue to work it. The secretary, as I said yesterday, has talked to a number of leaders in the region, has spoke to President Bazoum on a number of occasions. ECOWAS is, of course, involved on the front lines and is continuing to work it diligently. I don't have any updates, but it continues to be our policy to push for his full restoration.
Just one more. I wondered if you foresee, if that is unsuccessful and the status quo remains, do you see U.S. security cooperation with the government in Niger continuing? You know, I know you've spoken to this could have an impact on humanitarian aid and other things, but in terms of the security cooperation, which is a major part of the relationship, is that likely to continue even if they don't reverse course?
Again, I don't want to go into hypotheticals because that is an outcome that we hope is not fulfilled. We hope to see the president restored to leadership of the country. He's the democratically elected president, and all of our work right now is to see him restored. As Secretary Blinken has made clear, however, there are hundreds of millions of dollars in aid from the United States that are at stake. I don't want to talk about what specifically we might do if President Bazoum is not restored to authority, but certainly our aid, our assistance is at stake. But again, I think it's premature to speculate what that might look like at this point.
Follow up on
Yeah.
on Niger on that one. You guys mentioned it at Kirby again this morning. You know, and you believe there's a little window or of opportunity, or how you want to call it. I'm not sure, for diplomacy and to restore President Bazoum. On what basis are you saying that? What window is this exactly? Because on the ground, things are not going that way at all.
So there is a window. I would say we make those assessments based on the fact we are continuing to have conversations with President Bazoum. Other leaders in the region are continuing to have conversations with him. We're continuing to have conversations with other leaders in Niger. We've spoken with the former president, and continue to press for the leaders of the security leaders who are attempting to seize power, to press for them to restore President Bazoum to his rightful place as the democratically elected leader of the country. We will pursue that for as long as that possibility remains open. It does remain open today. I wouldn't want to speculate on how long that might remain open, but as long as it is, we'll continue to press that case because we believe that the democratically elected leader who was chosen by the people ought to be the one who leads the country.
Follow up on that.
Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Just very quickly, we all have seen pictures from the weekend how protesters were waving Russian flags. chanting Putin's name. Is there any involvement from Russia that you have noticed during the past couple of days?
We have not seen any evidence that Russia was behind this coup, but certainly it would not be out of character for Russia or for the Wagner Group to try to take advantage of instability in this country or any other in Africa. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, sir. Jahan Saibali from Airway News TV, Pakistan. There was a deadly bomb blast suicide attack in Pakistan. More than 54 people were killed. Dozens of have life-threatening injuries. And it is not about 54 people, it's about 54 families. Would you like to share your comments?
We condemn in the strongest terms the attack in northwestern Pakistan on Sunday during a political rally. We are deeply saddened by the loss of life and injuries sustained from the explosion and share our heartfelt condolences with those affected by the attack. The Pakistani people have suffered greatly at the hands of terrorists. We believe in the resilience of Pakistan's people and their capacity to recover from this devastating attack. No country should have to suffer such acts of terror, which are, of course, an affront to all peaceful and democratic societies. And I'll say finally that we remain committed to working with Pakistan to address the shared threat posed by terrorist groups throughout the region and support the Pakistani government's efforts to combat terrorism in a manner that promotes the rule of law and the protection of human rights.
A few days ago, you told us that United States will not allow Afghanistan to be used against United States and its partners. Pakistan is a close partner, and Tehrik-e-Taliban, Pakistan, Daesh, ISIS is the biggest threat operating from Afghanistan and targeting innocent civilians and security forces. So what kind of assurances or message you got from Taliban in a recent meeting in Doha?
We made clear in that meeting, as we have in our other meetings with the Taliban or other engagements with the Taliban, that we believe it is important that they not allow Afghanistan to be used as a base for terrorist attacks in the region or anywhere else.
So one last question, please. The attack have raised questions about whether Pakistan's security establishment can stamp out militancy without the American air and other military support it relied on during 2014 security operation. Is Pakistan asking any support, like military support?
I'm not going to get into conversations between our two countries, but I will say that the State Department does fund several counterterrorism capacity building programs in Pakistan focused on law enforcement and the justice sector, and will continue to do so.
Thank you. Wajid Ali Sayyed, I'm from GeoTV, Pakistan. The Chinese leadership is in Pakistan these days to mark 10 years of the CPEC project. Any comments on this relationship?
Yeah, I will say that, first of all, our support for Pakistan's economic success is unwavering. We'll continue to engage with Pakistan about strengthening our trade and investment ties, all which are priorities for our bilateral relationship. With respect to investments by any country, we believe good governance, long-term capacity building, and sustainable market-based approaches that allow the private sector flourish are the best paths to sustained growth and development. We welcome trade and investment that promotes such development and growth, but we will continue in all cases to emphasize the need for transparency, sustainable financing practices, and preservation of national and data security to ensure mutual benefit for both Pakistan and its partners. We have not always seen that with respect to investments by the PRC in countries around the world, but if investments that promote transparency and responsible debt management, we believe are appropriate.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt. So enough of Mr. Donald Liu and Cypher, I promise, no more.
I don't believe you, but we'll see.
No more. But I'm moving to a subject that I hope for the next couple of weeks you are not going to get bored from me, and I hope you will read about it a lot too. So I want to start with that. For last 1 week, I personally, after a long time, since I moved to the US 8 years ago, I've been dealing with a bunch of different mafias and stuff, but it doesn't matter. But my question that brings me to this whole thing is, and I've raised this question with Mr. Kirby as well, 8 years ago. Since last 20 years, since 20 years when the U.S. has been was in Afghanistan, how much responsibility till today do you think the U.S. or the State Department takes in the number of deaths caused by the heroin trade from Afghanistan, which is the largest producer of heroin in the world? Every country, every nation has thousands of people die every year.
I think the responsibility for those deaths rests with the traffickers of heroin and those that enable it.
Exactly. And that
Okay.
brings me to the second question. Just
Okay,
very
all right,
minor
let's-
questions,
we got a lot of
please.
people- we got a lot of people with their hands
Very
up, so
quickly,
let's
but very
move through it.
important, Matt. I swear I have no agenda with
I know,
it
I know.
except
Just-
professional journalism.
Just want to get to the question.
How much funds has the U.S. provided to Pakistan in last 20 years with regard to drug trafficking?
I do not have.
But will you provide it to
I
me?
do not have my abacus here in front of me to add it up.
But
So,
next
but
time,
we
can
will.
I ask you that?
I will happily look into it.
Just last one.
Yep.
May I?
No, let me move around, and if there's time, I'll come back to you. But go Saeed, and I'll come to you, Abby.
Thank you, Matt. There's been a lot of reports about a grand old initiative that may be coming from the White House on a grand peace plan by the Biden administration that includes normalization of the Saudis in exchange for a nuclear program, a security agreement, and many others, as was revealed by Thomas Friedman last week. I wonder if you're aware of these reports.
Aware of the reports? Certainly,
And have you read them and so on?
we have engaged in promoting such normalization from the State Department. As you may remember, the Secretary Blinken traveled to Saudi Arabia,
Right.
talked about normalization relations with Israel with the Crown Prince, and then has discussed it with the Prime Minister of Israel as well.
So you are in tandem with the White House in terms of working together and so on?
Of course.
Of course, okay. So let me ask you something. I mean, it used to be that the United States of America used to have a peace envoy, an envoy for peace, but now you have replaced him with a normalization envoy. Is that correct? So
We
you
have it.
decided-
We do have a normalization envoy, but
Right.
the senior leadership of this department, as the senior leadership of at the White House, from the president on down, have made clear that we support a two-state process, two-state solution, and it continues to be our policy.
Nonetheless, you don't have a peace envoy. You have an envoy for the Abraham Accord and normalization.
I don't think you should read into. I
that's
don't
where
think
the
you should read
priority
in. I don't think you should read into anything about relative prioritization based on the appointment of a special envoy. There are senior officials in this building and senior officials at the White House who are actively engaged in pressing for a two-state solution and who raise it directly with senior leaders in Israel, including the Prime Minister.
So, when was the last time that the United States actually tried to broker some sort of a talks, even peace talks between
there have
the
been,
Palestinians
this
and
is
the
the
Israelis and
second
so on?
historical question at the briefing today. I will say that I well,
Rhetorical
let me
question,
Saeed, let
you
me
know.
let me when you I
Sure.
don't interrupt when you ask a question. I appreciate you letting me give my answer. It is an issue that we have raised repeatedly in our conversations with leaders in Israel, as well as our conversations with leaders of the Palestinian Authority.
But the truth is, I mean, there are envoys. There's Andrew Miller today met with Palestinians, went to Palestinian towns and so on. But there is no effort to reignite, if you wish, or restart peace talks. You agree with me, right?
Saeed, it is our policy that we continue to press both the Israeli Prime Minister and the leadership of the Palestinian Authority for. It is also an issue that has come up in the context of normalization. I don't know if you followed the press conference when the Secretary traveled to Saudi Arabia. The Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia made clear that one of the things that they were interested in the context of normalization was seeing some progress on issues between Israel and the Palestinian people. No, I promised Abby she would go next, so let me, okay.
On this topic,
Yeah.
do you have an update on the efforts that the U.S. is making with Saudi Arabia and Israel, and where are the sticking points on this matter?
Well, as I've said before, it continues to be a priority for us, but it is not something where we are going to constantly read out what are private diplomatic conversations. Let me go to, hold on. Let me just, I'm gonna work the room a little bit because other people have had their hands up and you had.
This is going back.
I'm not trying to be, it's just, I gotta give everyone a chance.
This is going back to Afghanistan. The readout of the discussions between the U.S. and the Taliban in Doha mentioned that the U.S. officials were pressing for the immediate and unconditional release of detained U.S. citizens. How many U.S. citizens are currently detained in Afghanistan, and what can you tell us about their condition?
I'm not going to make public the number that are there, but it is correct that in the meeting with leaders of the Taliban, we did raise that issue as well as a number of issues such as the resumption of flights, counter-narcotics, combating terrorism, and we continue to press for the release of the detainees, but due to their privacy, I don't think it's appropriate for me to get into their specific conditions. follow-up on Afghanistan? No, let me.
One more follow-up
There's-
on that.
Let me just say, like everyone's shouting questions today, and it would be, people can raise their hand. I will hold on. I will work it's the weather. I will work the room and get to everyone, but no one needs to shout their question.
As a part of the Taliban's readout of those meetings, they said a significant portion of the restrictions on Afghanistan's banks had been lifted. The development is expected to ease banking transactions and facilitate economic activities in the country. Can you speak a little bit more about what was discussed about?
Yeah, so I will say I saw that in their readout. Other people here saw that in their readout, didn't know what they were talking about. There were no such restrictions that we are aware of, and any sanctions that we do have in place have not been lifted. So we were confused by that language in their readout. All right, go ahead. Yeah.
Just on Afghanistan, really quickly. One of the conditions that were mentioned in the State Department earlier was that the Taliban needs to, in order for it to be recognized in some way, shape, or form, it needs to meet some criteria in terms of human rights and etc. Thousands of ethnic groups consisting of Hazaras and other groups within Afghanistan has been facing genocide in some way, shape, or form. And also at the same time, we have just heard that the Taliban is actually burning all types of books relating to music, and the erosion of women's rights are just rampant in the country. But firstly, even just going back to the genocide of groups like the Hazaras, for example, would that be something that the State Department would consider to be one of the conditions for the recognition of the Taliban?
So I'm not going to stand here and say what the conditions are. I will say, as we have said in the past, that the Taliban continues to seek recognition. It continues to seek legitimacy, and that's not where we are right now for a number of reasons, including the treatment of their own people, including their many flagrant human rights violations. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mark. Today, Baghdad commemorate the 9th anniversary of the Yazidi genocide. David Berger, the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, Deputy Chief of Mission, were there and said the U.S. commitment to the Yazidi community and also civil society. It's been 4 years that the Shingar agreement has not been implemented by both the Iraqi and also Iraqi government and the Kurdish government. And also thousands of the Yazidi people are still living in a dire situation in the makeshift campus. What's this commitment that the U.S. has towards the Yazidi people, and what's your view about the current situation in Shingar?
So the United States is fully committed to supporting Yazidis and other communities in Iraq that were devastated by ISIS, and we are working closely with and supporting the government of Iraq as they pursue justice and accountability. With respect to the 2020 Sinjar Agreement, we believe it was an important and constructive step forward. The lack of implementation and the long-standing political deadlock on the agreement are not acceptable. Meaningful progress to implement the Sinjar Agreement is a necessary step to strengthening Iraq's sovereignty and territorial integrity. In particular, the U.S. Embassy, as you referenced, in Baghdad called today for officials in Baghdad and Erbil to immediately break the political deadlock by working with Sinjar communities and Yazidi leaders to appoint a mayor in Sinjar.
Is there any pressure from the U.S. on the Kurdish and also the Iraqi leaders to implement the Shingar Agreement?
I'm sorry, I just
Is there
couldn't
any
hear.
pressure from the U.S. government on the Kurdish and also the Iraqi government to implement the Sinjar Agreement?
I think that's exactly what I just said.
And then one question about the Iranian female journalists. That Tehran yesterday sentenced 2 female journalists over 4 years. Do you have any reaction to that?
We are aware. We're obviously following those cases as we've followed the cases of previous sentences of journalists in Iran. I would say that the Iranian regime's continued crack down on journalists for engaging in the acts of journalists, oftentimes with baseless and completely discredited allegation, remains a violation of their human rights, something that the world continues to watch. Alex, I've already come to you. Let me go.
Thanks so much, Matt. Really appreciate it. I want to just circle back to Israel for a second. Dan Shapiro was just in the region trying to help re-jump, I guess, or jumpstart the Negev forum. Are you worried about the future of the forum with Morocco recently, obviously postponing a meeting, and are we any closer to another meeting after his trip?
I am not going to speak to the scheduling of another meeting, other than to say obviously we support rescheduling or scheduling the next meeting of the Negev Forum. And in general, we continue to look for ways to both broaden and deepen the Abraham Accords and other normalization agreements. It's a priority. We just talked about the potential normalization of relations with Saudi Arabia, but it's something that senior leaders of the department continue to work on. Go ahead, Olivia.
Matt, noting the readouts that you issued late yesterday between U.S. and Chinese officials here in Washington, can you confirm today whether the invitation was made to Foreign Minister Wang Yi to visit the U.S.?
I can. As you noted, Assistant Secretary Crittenbrink yesterday met with his counterpart, Director Yang Tao, here at the State Department in Washington, D.C. This was a follow-up to the meetings that we had in Beijing in June, as well as the recent meeting several weeks ago that Secretary Blinken had with Wang Yi. In the meeting yesterday, we extended the invitation that had previously been made to the former Foreign Minister Qin Gang and made clear that that invitation did transfer over to Minister Li, as I somewhat previewed in my remarks yesterday.
And can you say whether that invitation was accepted and whether an agenda or timeline for the visit has been set?
With respect to accepting the invitation, I'll let the Chinese government speak to their side of it. We certainly expect that it is something that they would accept, and it is a trip that we expect to happen, but we have not yet scheduled a date.
And in terms of the topics that were raised, the readout was sort of terse. Did the meetings notch any progress on the priority areas that were identified in the aftermath of Secretary Blinken's trip, specifically on fentanyl and American detainees?
We continue to make progress on those issues. We don't have, I don't have any concrete results. We're not at the point of establishing the fentanyl working group, which, as you know, has been a major priority for us, and we continue to press the Chinese side to agree to. But we did feel it was important to continue the conversations. That was something that we thought we had established in the meetings in Beijing. Since then, the Secretary has had another meeting with his counterpart, and we have these meetings going on at sub-cabinet, sub-ministerial levels to continue talking about these. We will note, as we did even before we left Beijing, that we fully recognize that progress on many of these areas is hard, but we are committed to continuing to work because the issues on which we need to cooperate with China we think are important, just as the issues in which we need to raise concerns with them are important.
Last one, there was the specific issue of Travis King in North Korea and enlisting China's support in that come up, and have the Chinese indicated in any direction whether they're willing to engage on that?
I don't know if it came, I just don't know if it came up. I can check. Okay, go ahead.
Last week, the Ukrainian Defense Ministry said that Kyiv would submit its first report on the use of cluster munitions to the United States. Has the administration received this report yet?
I'm not aware if we have.
My second question is about the Peace Talk Summit in Saudi Arabia on Saturday. Do you think it is a good idea to organize such a summit without Russian participation in it?
Of the president of Ukraine, but he has made clear in the past that he'd be willing to engage with them on such matters. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt. Leo Cosgrove with the Gray Zone. So back in May, I asked you about Gonzalo Lira. He was the U.S. citizen arrested in Ukraine for posting dissident content online, and you told me the State Department was aware of his arrest in May. And we learned last night through a series of tweets by him that he had been tortured in the Ukrainian prison, and he was now on a motorcycle with a broken rib trying to flee to the Hungarian border. And so I'm wondering, you know, if this is true, given the State Department knew of his arrest and his detention, how has this been allowed to occur? We have a U.S. citizen being detained and perhaps tortured in the prison of one of our strongest allies.
Well, you lost me with the perhaps and the if this is true. I think I'd want to verify those reports before I commented on it. Alex, go ahead.
Alex, go ahead. Is the State Department investigating?
I just want to verify anything before I comment. Go ahead, Alex.
Two separate topics. First on Belarusian and Polish border. The incident that this morning was reported, referring to a Belarusian helicopter crossing the border, just got confirmed by Polish defense minister saying that they have noticed insertion in Polish territory. Are you aware of the incident, and what kind of reaction will that invite from the NATO?
I was aware of the reports this morning. I believe if it's accurate, and I don't dispute your accuracy, that the Polish government has come out and confirmed that. That's something that happened while I was up at the podium, and I'm going to maintain my policy of not commenting on things that break while I'm up here that I haven't had a chance to read myself.
That appears to be true.
Again, with the if, I would rather wait and verify it with my own eyes before I comment on it.
Okay, moving to South Caucasus, I am told that Special Advisor Bono is traveling to the region this week. Do you have anything about details of the trip and what kind of message does the Secretary want to convey to the regional leaders?
I don't, he's not the Secretary. I don't have, unless you meant separately, the message. Yes, I don't have any details of the trip to, of any trip to convey. I will say, though, as we have said consistently, we do believe that a peace agreement is within reach. It's why we continue to engage both at the senior-most levels of this department and at sub-cabinet levels with leaders in Armenia and Azerbaijan to urge them to reach the difficult compromises that are necessary to reach a full peace agreement.
Do you know if he's going to visit Tbilisi as well?
I just don't have details on his trip.
Final housekeeping on the new bureau that was established today, Global Health, Security and Diplomacy. As I understand, the bureau will be laser focused on the pandemic and relevant topics. What will be its involvement in the conflicts area, like Ukraine, South Caucasus, and other conflicts? Will there be any involvement, and who will represent the bureaus in the respective countries?
Well, the Bureau is being launched to lead our work in fighting pandemics and other health emergencies around the world. I don't have any specific information about what it will be doing in conflict zones. But stay tuned. We launched the Bureau today, so yeah, go ahead.
So the Bureau being established, I'm wondering if the State Department will see, find further investigation into the pandemic origin as one of the priorities for the Bureau. And on that, just recently, a few lawmakers have introduced a bill to ban the NIH from funding the animal experiments in adversarial countries such as China. And I'm wondering if the State Department shares that kind of position, and whether this pandemic origin topic will be one of the topics that come up in the ongoing conversations you have with the Chinese counterparts in the days ahead.
I do not have, I don't have any comment on that legislation, which I've not reviewed. I will say that the work of the Bureau is forward-leaning to bring together global health leadership, staff, and resources from across the department to address current and future health challenges, to strengthen our global health security architecture, and to prevent, detect, respond to, and control infectious diseases. With respect to those questions about the origin of COVID, that is a question that has been much examined inside the United States government. I'm not sure that we need a new bureau to take on questions that have already been examined repeatedly by the intelligence community and other agencies.
Among human rights in China, so the House Select Committee on Chinese Communist Party has flagged the BlackRock and MSCI as two companies that fund Chinese companies that help advance the Chinese military and further human rights abuses in China. And I'm wondering if you have any comments on this and see any concerns in U.S. companies having such financial links with Chinese companies.
I have not reviewed that report or talked to others in the department about it, so I don't have a comment on it. Shah.
Yeah, do you have any comments on the fighting between the Palestinian factions in the Ain al-Hilwi camp in South Lebanon?
I do. We continue to follow the alarming reports of escalating violence in the refugee camp that has reportedly resulted in at least 11 deaths and many injured, including 2 children, with at least 2,000 people displaced. We are especially concerned by reports that the violence has damaged at least 2 schools operated by UNRWA, We applaud UNRWA's work to provide emergency shelter and humanitarian services to the displaced, and we call on all factions in the camp to respect the protection and dignity of civilians and public and private property, including schools and healthcare facilities, and to abide by the humanitarian principles of neutrality, impartiality, and independence, including with respect to medical care. There you go. Let me come back to you. I'm gonna work some people that haven't gotten a question yet, so go ahead.
My question. Today the United States imposed restriction for Hungarian passport holders, under the visa waiver program, saying that Budapest has not addressed the security vulnerabilities repeatedly raised by Washington. I would ask you, can you elaborate more on which these security vulnerabilities are? And secondly, if I may, a U.S. official said, and I'm quoting, the United States is paying close attention to Hungary's choices. So are the restrictions on the visa program relate to other issues that cause friction, human and civil rights and other problems between U.S. and Orban government?
So I would say first, the new conditions on the visa waiver program have nothing to do with any issue other than Hungary's compliance with the visa waiver program itself. In 2011, the Hungarian government launched a simplified naturalization process. Nearly 1 million people gained Hungarian citizenship through this program before Hungary began instituting full biometric and identity verification in 2020. During that period, from 2011 to 2020, the program lacked adequate procedures to verify applicants' identities before allowing them to obtain citizenship. We know that valid Hungarian passports were then fraudulently obtained by criminals and individuals with no connection to Hungary. And since we've identified this issue and raised it with the Hungarian government, they have not taken the necessary steps to fully mitigate these border and travel security threats. So we have made the requirements of the visa waiver program clear to Hungary for multiple years, over multiple administrations. We provided them extensive guidance on ways that they could mitigate the vulnerability. Unfortunately, the Hungarian government has not opted to take those steps, and so we were forced to institute this new policy today. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, you said that valid Hungarian passports were obtained by criminals. Did any of those criminals come to the U.S. on those passports?
I don't have specific information about who came in, in the last however many years.
Were there any Hungarian passport holders that came to the U.S. with questionable backgrounds that triggered this?
I don't have information on people who came, but I would say it was a policy question. We looked at the fact that there were people who were getting passports without going through rigorous screening that we think is necessary to gain, should be necessary to gain a passport. And so we raised the issue with the Hungarian government, gave them an opportunity to address the situation, and they refused to do so.
And just why did it take 9 years to change?
I won't speak to that other than that we were trying to work with the Hungarian government to give them an opportunity to correct the situation. It's not a step we wanted to take today. We engaged with them, as I said, for multiple years, over multiple administrations, working through possible changes that they could make, and they refused to do so, which ultimately led us to take this step.
And then can I just ask one question on Niger? Sorry, I was late coming in today.
Oh, the dreaded repeat a question because you weren't here.
I hope I won't repeat it though, no. You said earlier that the U.S. has no indications of threats to U.S. citizens or facilities in Niger right now. How would you characterize the safety, the security situation on the ground right now for those U.S. citizens and for the U.S. diplomats who are still there?
I would say that broadly the situation in the capital remains calm. However, we have reached out to American citizens who, those American citizens who have communicated with us. We have reached out to them and told them that, of course, it's difficult to leave the country right now. The security forces who have attempted to seize power have closed the airport and closed the borders. So we've asked them to remain in place and limit their movements around the capital. And we've broadly said, if you are an American citizen who is in Niger, to register with our Safe Traveler program, and we will keep you updated on any information as it changes.
And then just last question, with regard to the coup determination, that the U.S. is not calling this a coup at this time, how are you characterizing what is happening? As an attempted coup? Is there some other description?
As I said yesterday, it is clear that security forces have attempted to seize power. It's not yet clear that they will ultimately be successful. Saeed.
Thank you. On Syria, actually the skies of Syria, the Russian Ministry of Defense claims that over the past few days there's been violation by the U.S. Of the deconflictions agreement by F-16s, F-35s, and the MQ-9 Reapers. I wonder if you have any comment on that. They're saying that you did not even inform them.
For any specific military operations, as usual, I would refer you to the Pentagon. It's not something I can speak to from this podium. As I've noted before, though, the United States and the global coalition to defeat ISIS continue to work with our local partners in Syria to maintain constant pressure on ISIS remnants and to ensure ISIS's lasting defeat. I will reiterate the statements the Department of Defense has made that we strongly urge Russian forces in Syria to immediately stop reckless and threatening behavior and to instead adhere to the standards of behavior expected of a professional force. But with respect to any exact engagements, I would refer to the Pentagon.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yes, on June 27th, Chairman Gallagher and other Republican members of the House Select Committee on the CCP sent Secretary Blinken a letter urging him not to renew the U.S.-China Science and Technology Agreement that's set to expire August 27th. Has the department issued a response, or can you give us any updates?
I don't believe we have yet issued a response, but I will keep you updated as we work through the issue. Go around.
I just wanted to come back to something you talked about yesterday, the visa waiver program with Israel. Could you clarify in order to get into the visa waiver program, Israel will have to extend the new policies that it's introduced for U.S. citizens to people living in Gaza?
There's not much to clarify other than exactly that. We have made clear, both publicly and privately, that the visa waiver program needs to apply to all American citizens in Israel, whether they be in the West, and that includes whether they be in the West Bank or whether they be in Gaza. We understand that there can be different procedures for Americans in the West Bank because of the different security situation there. But we have made clear that the program needs to apply for Americans there as well. And to the extent that Israel needs to make changes to how they're implementing the program now, that is something that we fully expect them to do.
And they would have to do that before this September deadline.
I would just say we expect them to make those changes. We're in constant conversations with it. We're in conversations with them about it now, and it is one of the requirements of the program.
Sure. Separate issue because it hasn't come up. The events in Myanmar where the junta has partially pardoned Aung San Suu Kyi. I wonder if that changes your view of the U.S. position towards Myanmar at all, whether and sort of what would it take for this military junta to do to start to ease sanctions against them?
I would say that no, it does not change our position. We remain deeply concerned by the Burma military regime's extension of the state of emergency, which will only prolong the violence and delay a just and peaceful resolution to the current crisis. We have repeatedly called on the military to immediately release Aung San Suu Kyi, deposed President Win Myint, and all the others unjustly detained, something they have not done. And we continue to urge the regime to end its violence, to allow unhindered humanitarian access, seek justice for survivors, and engage with all stakeholders to pursue a peaceful, just, and democratic future for Burma. So there are a number of steps that we believe they have yet to take, that they must before we could talk about any change in our posture towards them. All right, go this, and then we'll wrap up.
So last one, just regarding China, there has been, firstly, Sehun Kim, senior correspondent for Global Strategy. There has been an ongoing transnational repression against the Uyghurs living in the United States, particularly a lot of them U.S. citizens, green card holders, and asylees. Recently, there was a turn yourself in video released by the Chinese police telling dissidents and Uyghurs living overseas that they must come back and turn themselves in. And for an example, someone like Calvin Organi, who's actually living in the United States right now, a Uyghur refugee, has been receiving multiple threats by from the Chinese Communist Party. I'm just wondering if this is something that that will be brought up as in terms of a topic of human rights when Wang Yi or any other CCP official visits the United States.
We, in our engagements with PRC leaders, we always raise human rights issues, including the treatment of the Uyghurs. Secretary Blinken has raised that directly in his meetings. Other officials raise them directly in their meetings. Human rights is always on the table for the United States. Thank you.